Salute, 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 salute. Boxing Nocturnal Thoughts, man. Salute to everybody out there. Real quick video that I'm getting out the way. So, I wanted to talk about Virgil Ortiz had a victory over Michael McKinson, and, you know, him versus Jerron Boots Ennis. And I want to talk about Bomac and his track record with his fighters coming up short. So real quick video, get out the way. And it's funny because I want to talk about, to me, you cannot avoid talking about Terrence Bud Crawford versus Errol Spence if you're talking about boxing, unless I talk about some heavyweight, Anthony Joshua versus Alexander Usyk, or if I talk about Claressa Shields versus Savannah Marshalls. Other than that, everything else is touching on Errol Spence versus Terrence Bud Crawford. Danny Garcia has a fight against Jose Benavidez. You got to talk about Errol Spence, and you got to talk about Terrence Bud Crawford. You know what I'm saying? Virgil Ortiz fights, you got to talk about Errol Spence. If Jerron Boots Ennis fights, you got to talk about Errol Spence or Terrence Bud Crawford. You know what I'm saying? Any wave that happens in boxing right now, you damn near got to talk about Errol Spence and Terrence Bud Crawford. So, a little bit of this conversation is going to have to be about Terrence Bud Crawford and Errol Spence. Terrence Bud Crawford, I feel like right now, when he did his last little interview, he had what people call a Freudian slip, where you let your subconscious truth come out within conversations unintentionally. So you're trying to camouflage, or you're trying to say something and, you know, edit it, but subconsciously the truth comes out. When he said, hopefully, you know, I love this fight, hopefully we can make that fight down the line. I mean, real soon, not down the line. I think that was just a slip where he's intentionally, you know, he's keeping the belt, and he's like, nah, 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 boo boo, you can't get me. And he's trying to double down, triple down on this 50-50 in order to make this fight happen between him and Errol Spence, in my opinion. But Bomac, who is Terrence Bud Crawford's trainer since the beginning, you know, his track record, man, I question his track record. We know he had a fighter, Jamel Herring, sort of get on a winning streak with Bomac, but then he comes up short against Shakur Stevenson. But I said you can't hold that against him, because Shakur Stevenson is like a young phenom, special fighter. Jamel Herring, you know, he had his day. Then Maurice Hooker, same thing. He gets beat by Virgil Ortiz. You say Virgil Ortiz is an up-and-coming young phenom. He's a special fighter. You know, Maurice Hooker was a champion, but maybe he's just, you know, past his prime. Amir Khan. I'm looking at Bomac and Terrence Bud Crawford completely sideways on Amir Khan, training with them from the get-go. Amir Khan gets beat by Kell Brook, but I'm like, if you fought this man and he quit, when Terrence Bud Crawford fought Amir Khan and Amir Khan quit, it didn't make sense to me how they was welcoming him with the open arms, like, we'll train you. And then he goes in there and gets embarrassed by Kell Brook. But just recently, Bomac had Maurice Hooker fight against, to me, not a elite fighter at all whatsoever, Blair the Flair Cobbs. Okay, hey, he redeemed himself a little bit, because his last fight he didn't look too good. He got embarrassed, you know what I'm saying? But I had to give him his name back. To me, he had turned into a joke, as he was doing all this big talking, and he go in there and gets embarrassed. But now he's redeemed himself, because he fought against Maurice Hooker, and shit, he damn near shocked a lot of people. He knocked Maurice Hooker down 3 times, and he beat him and outboxed him. But the spotlight is being shined on Bomac as a trainer now. because we want to see Terrence Bud Crawford versus Errol Spence, and people were starting to say, what kind of trainer is McIntyre at this point in time? Is Terrence Bud Crawford just an elite level fighter, and he just happened to come across a once in a lifetime type of a athlete and a boxer, and he just kind of got lucky? You know what I'm saying? Or is he that good of a trainer where he could take anybody and turn them into the next Terrence Bud Crawford or something similar to that, or at least have them improve and get better? We have these things. The same thing we look at, like Eddie Reynoso, and say, is it just Canelo that's great, or is it just put the other stuff to the side? But at one point in time, he had Canelo and Andy Ruiz and Oscar Valdez and Ryan Garcia. You know what I'm saying? But okay, I don't want to focus in on that. But it's looking like Bo Mack and his track record is not looking too great right now. And then when you get the ringside to hear his instructions to Maurice Hooker, and then Terrence Bud Crawford has to come down there and give better instructions as of what to do inside the ring to change the trajectory, it doesn't look good for McIntyre, and it doesn't look good for him if we was to get this Terrence Bud Crawford versus Errol Spence in comparison to Derrick James training a champion like Jermell Charlo to come back and destroy Brian Castaño, and the way he had Errol Spence looking against Yordenis Ugas. Virgil ORTIZ, he pulled out of his last fight. So I stopped thinking about him fighting Jaron Boots Ennis. Jaron Boots Ennis had fought that Custio Clayton guy and was talking about reeling in the big fish. And I'm like, you know what? I haven't seen him fight a elite person yet. He fought Delorme, and he fought another guy, I forget his name, but they just got blown out of there. Then he fought Custio Clayton, and he blew him out of there. You know what I'm saying? Virgil Ortiz was doing the same thing, man. He fought Agitas Kavalauskas, had a little bit of a stumbling in there. Agitas Kavalauskas, the Mean Machine, is a front runner. He came in there with some power. He clipped Virgil Ortiz a little bit. Then Virgil Ortiz got his bearings, and he knocked out Agitas Kavalauskas, similar to the same way it was with Terrence Bud Crawford. And then, like I said, Virgil Ortiz, he knocked out Maurice Hooker. Then he had his other fight coming up, and it got delayed because people were saying he had a weight issue. I think he had developed something like that. What is it called? Something like rhabdomyalgia, something like that, where you overtrain and the proteins and enzymes in your muscle spill out into your blood flow, and it can just destroy your body. The first time I ever heard of that, it's a true thing too. The first time I ever heard of that, my cousin husband, he was fresh out the joint, was swole. He got married to my cousin, and got comfortable and got that dad vibe. And I remember one time I was in the gym working out, and he came in there, he was like, "Cuz, I'm about to get swole like you, man." He came in there with like 2 or 3 other big dudes, and they was over there smashing the chest, you know what I'm saying, dumbbells, heavy and everything like that. Then I never seen him again. So I'm like, when I bumped into him months later, I'm like, "What happened?" He was like, "Dude, right after that workout, the next day I was in the hospital because my chest swelled up like 4 times as big as it normally would." Because he was training like he trained like he never stopped training. You know what I'm saying? You was doing time, you was training consistently. Then you got out of shape. Then you went in the gym and you tried to bang it out like you never stopped. And he had developed that same thing, rhabdomyalgia, something like that. And his whole chest, it almost killed him. His whole chest swole up to where all that blood and all that acid spilled out into his body. He almost died. So when Virgil Ortiz had that same situation, that rose up a red flag with me. So to think about him fighting Jaron Boots Ennis, I was like, that's going to be a no-go right now, because to me, he had to have let himself get out of shape a little bit in order for him to overtrain to make that weight, and then had to pull out of a fight. But now he just reintroduced himself on the scene against this McKenzie guy, and he looked good again. You know what I'm saying? But I think he still put himself like a notch underneath what people look at Jaron Boots Ennis as, because Jaron Boots Ennis hasn't had any setback. So the conversation still is, We want to see Virgil ORTIZ versus Terrence Bud Crawford, or we want to see Boots versus Terrence Bud Crawford, or Boots versus Keith Thurman, or Boots versus Errol Spence, or Virgil ORTIZ versus Errol Spence. But I always looked at it like, I want to see Boots versus Virgil ORTIZ while these young bulls is in their prime, because we already had to wait so long for this Terrence Bud Crawford versus Errol Spence. You know what I'm saying? And it really doesn't, I don't know if this fight's going to happen or not. I really don't know. You know what I'm saying? Time will tell. But I'll be honest with you, like I said, it looked like Terrence Bud Crawford right now is playing keep away with that last belt. And, you know, his whole camp is looking a little suspicious, because you got a guy like Bomac, and no disrespect to anybody that's dealing with obesity. You know what I'm saying? I salute it. Everybody got something that they deal with. But I don't know how good of a trainer he is at this point in time, because he has to be dealing with some kind of health issues right now. You know what I'm saying? That has to bring down his ability to be a trainer. If you look at like Derek James being in shape and doing videos where he's running same day, same grind, or different days, same grind, and he's getting in shape alongside of his fighters. And you can see how that relationship goes hand in hand with him getting in shape, and Jermell Charlo getting in shape, and Derek James getting in shape, and Frank Martin getting in shape. And then you look at Bomac, who's over the years, to me his health has diminished, because he was always a big dude, but to me his health has diminished, which, like I said, I ain't gonna never talk bad about nobody like that, but I'm just saying, as a trainer, that has to be affected. Your health is your wealth, and if you physically that out of shape, you got to be mentally somewhat out of shape as well. You know what I'm saying? So him going in there, and I know Terrence Bud Crawford got other trainers too, but his main trainer, when you look at this fight, you look at Bomac versus Derek James. Bow.